Hi, I'm Amanda Lehman-Choi, and we're here in the beautiful Oak Ridge Presentation Center by Westbank. And I'm here with Sharlene Wark, Ben Amzaleg, Vanessa Miller, and Amar Paul. And today we're having our second roundtable discussion, and the topic is pre-sales. So let's get into it. So you all have very diverse business models and how you run your business. So let's start with Amar. How do you run yours?
Yeah, so ours is more focused now on the pre-sale buyers side of things as opposed to representing developers. That's where I started in the business, but we saw a number of years back now, saw kind of a need for better representation on the buyer's side and helping people specifically entering new construction, because it is a different side of the business from your typical existing properties, different contracts, different legislation, different things to consider. So a large part of what we do is helping buyers in that transaction and kind of using our experience to make sure they're getting the best service they can.
Mm-hmm. And Vanessa and Sharlene, you guys work together. Can you tell me a little bit about how that works?
I think we're completely opposite. So we represent the developers, primarily small to mid-sized developments. And typically people like Amar are bringing buyers in that we work together.
Wonderful. And Ben?
I think I'm a little bit of a hybrid of both of you guys' business model. When I initially started, I focused on really servicing and working for the developer, so basically on the sales floor. And the niche that I kind of carved out of the market was really to focus on the service of people like Amar bringing their clients and the other realtors. And I've done that for almost 10 years now and worked with a few developers in the city. And what's happening now to my business, it's kind of morphing into something a little different with all the experience that I've been able to gain over the years and focusing it more into advising developers on kind of the best ways to roll out their product. And right now, I feel that this is the time because the market is not as strong as it used to be. So what's happening is you don't have lineups out of the door anymore. So you need to find ways to really service those buyers and be able to do those deals. And that's kind of where I come in.
Great. So for anyone watching who doesn't know, we're talking about pre-sales. You guys all have experience both in resale and pre-sale. Sharlene, would you mind explaining to anyone watching what pre-sale means and what the difference between them is?
Well, pre-sale, you are purchasing a home from the beginning. So no one's lived in it. The developer is building this home and you're coming in and picking out your color palettes and buying a home that is newly built compared to a resale where it's already been built in, lived in.
Oh, wonderful. So in my opinion, one of the hardest things about what you guys do is, right now we're in this very beautiful, highly conceptual space. I imagine it's quite difficult to have someone and have them spend hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars on something that doesn't yet exist. How do you work with your buyers or with the developers too on having the buyers understand what it is that they're buying?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it starts almost more macro with the pre-sale. So you first kind of learn the neighborhood and learn the developer and learn the building overall and the amenities and the features and what's going to happen in that neighborhood. And then you kind of work your way into units and floor plans and pricing details and stuff like that. So a buyer really needs to desire and fall in love with the whole concept to buy into a pre-sale, not just a specific layout. Whereas sometimes on the resale side, it's more about they already know the neighborhood they want, they already have the budget down, and they already just have more specific criteria. They're just looking for that perfect one-off unit. With pre-sale, it's a bit more about the whole picture of the concept of the building. So you start there.
Painting a picture of their lifestyle and everything like that.
Yeah. From the developer's perspective, we get involved early on. We kind of focus on what the demographic will be, and then we kind of create the unit allocation from there. So we have an understanding of what that area is looking for as far as size and scheme of the development. And then we really cater to that demographic and whether or not they want stairs, 1 level, 2 level, the size of the homes, and the style. And that's ultimately how we create the product that we bring to the market.
Yeah, just kind of highlighting that customizable idea and vision and just making it perfect for them.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Cool. I think the process is very similar to a resale and a pre-sale in a way that a buyer goes through this journey of finding their home. What really I find differentiates where a buyer finds these days is really the type of tools that developers offer the buyer to be able to kind of vision what is being built. Sharlene really hit it when you're basically buying a piece of paper. Like when you buy pre-sale, you're buying a piece of paper, you're buying a disclosure statement. Everything that's around us, there's always disclaimers that it can change at a given moment and there's really nothing you can do about it legally. So what developers are trying to do, like creating this amazing sales center, for example, is to conceptualize what will this feel like when it's done. And it costs a lot of money these days. So what's happening is you're seeing kind of that first-tier developers creating these amazing experiences and kind of mid-tier developers that are really restricted by budget, because this is really what runs the show, how much you can spend on creating that vision. But as Amar mentioned, you first need to find where you want to live. Like someone that wants to buy in Oak Ridge is not really interested in Brentwood. So it's really not a competition. But once you decide on an area, then it kind of narrows down to what the offering is. And whoever can present the offering in the best way, I find, is really who gets the clients. And in today's market, that's really your edge. So that's kind of like my 2 cents on that entire process that a buyer goes through when they buy pre-sales. And I think it's evolving.
That leads to my next question, which is about marketing for pre-sales, and I think you kind of started touching on that. There's a huge difference, in my opinion, about marketing a resale versus pre-sale. Would you mind speaking a little bit to your experience with that?
Absolutely. So there's so much that goes into the marketing. It depends how large the development is, the budget for the marketing. We specialize in the small to mid-sized developers, so we're very conscious on the marketing spend. So our biggest challenge is being able to conceptualize these developments with a really small budget. So when you're not dealing with the tower, and so we just display whatever we possibly can so that they can touch and feel as much as they can and have a really good understanding of the home that they're going to be moving into. And that's a blend of print advertising, digital advertising, and ultimately the presentation center.
Great. Would you say that that's usually a collaborative effort with the developer on coming up with a marketing plan?
Absolutely.
I think that right now, because the market's a little more challenging too, you're seeing more discrepancy between the developers doing it well and the ones who aren't doing it well. Because a couple years ago, it was almost everything would sell, and developers were able to cut back on cost in their marketing efforts and also hire less experienced salespeople. And now the market has become more challenging, especially for the smaller to mid-tier developers who don't have as much budget or established brand, that they do need to hire more skilled salespeople that can articulate that whole package as well and put a bit more of an emphasis on how they're building a building and the story they're trying to tell with the building, the quality of the materials, everything, because it's not going to just sell if it doesn't have, all the right check boxes now. So
I think that's kind of across the board. We're seeing people having to be a little bit sharper, not just even with marketing, but kind of almost with everything right now. What would you say, Ben?
I have to say that I'm kind of enjoying this market actually, because what it actually does is it gives the opportunity to the folks that really know what they're doing to really bubble up right now, and the folks that really were able to generate some sales just because they have a pulse, really, and they know how to speak English and they have a real estate license, and that's it, So that's what amazes me about this market. There is almost 14,000 realtors, and some of the deals over the years when the market was really hot that I was putting together, I was just like, how is this even coming together? Like, you can see the people that you're dealing with, there's really not a lot of, it's a very challenging deals. Let's say I've done a lot of challenging deals, but they stuck because everyone wanted to buy or everyone wanted to sell, and it worked. But right now, if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to have a very hard time putting a deal together. And that transitions into pre-sale as well. Developers that are inexperienced, if they're doing stuff that is really not how it should happen, they're not selling. And then they come to us and be like, hey, how can we sell? And then we basically tell them, you're doing everything wrong. You need to redo everything. It's like, but I spent all this money. It's like, you know what? That's just the reality of things, and you need to be honest. Where before, you could just take it over and be like, don't worry, we'll take care of it. And really, it sells. But it's not happening anymore. So really now what's happening is really great professionals are stepping up, like the guys around here, and they're doing really well, and some folks are not. And I think people need to look deep inside and be like, they either step their game or move to a different industry. That's kind of a tough truth.
Yeah, it makes you sharpen your skills again, right? So,
You have to.
Yeah, which is good.
Ben just stole my boardroom pitch. It's exactly what we say.
It's the reality. It was a matter of time. We've been in an up market for almost 10 years. I started in 2007, and just a year in, I hit the recession, and literally I remember that. The first year in real estate, I made $32,000, and I was just like, this sucks. What am I doing? Is this what I'm doing? And I was just like, okay, let's do another year and see how it goes. And 2008 came, and it was like even worse. I was like, oh, this is terrible. But I actually enjoyed real estate. I love architecture. I enjoyed talking to people. So I was just like, you know what? Let's stick it out. And it kind of like slowly turned around because I had a passion for it. But then some people get into the industry because it looks all ritzy and great. You're dressed nice, you smell good, you don't sweat, you drive nice cars. But it's not that simple. So just being honest.
For sure. Charlene, I know you're someone who is a very hard worker, and
Sometimes.
I think you can definitely speak to times where you've really had to sweat, even though I think there's definitely an outside perception that realtors don't sweat or anything like that. Can you speak to some of your experience of working hard and staying humble?
Well, I think for us, when we're launching a new project, it is a lot of work. It's time consuming. You're pretty much on from 8 a.m. until midnight. You're constantly working. You're on the phones. You are on. You're dealing with people, emails, phone calls. You're trying to sell the product, trying to get people into the door. And then all of a sudden you turn around, and then I've got 2 young kids that are asking for mommy and wanting you to be that other aspect. So juggling both, and I don't think that I ever stopped sweating. You were always sweating. You're always working no matter what you do. If you're at the office, if you're at home, you're still on call. Being an agent, you're on call 24/7. So you're always on call, but then you also have the family side of it where you have to, that keeps me humble, I think.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Keeps you in check.
It does. It does.
So you actually work with your family. I bet that keeps you in check.
Yeah, my wife keeps me in check in all capacities, home and work. So, but for us, that's a challenge in itself. Obviously, we got to know when to turn off work and be like husband and wife and be at home, right? So, having different roles within the team helps too. Not being both agents, so we're not overlapping everything. And I'm out and about with clients, and she's at the office, so you don't get too sick of each other, which is nice. But it's nice growing something together. So it's like your business, you're engulfed in it as a unit, but you keep your balance and not get on each other's nerves too often too.
So timelines, that's another big challenge that I imagine that's difficult to work with in pre-sales, because you're sometimes dealing with very tight timelines where things are closing in a month, and then you're also dealing with things that are 5+ years and then ongoing. How do you guys each have different ways where you manage communications both with developer and clients throughout those timelines, or how do you, especially when you're dealing with multiple projects that are happening, this year this completes, this year this completes, how do you deal with that?
So I think there's 2 aspects for this question is really, for example, for Amar, how does he deal once you put a deal together? He's representing the buyer. So for the next 3 years, in some capacity, he needs to keep in touch. For my business model, when I work with developers, is really constantly taking that project throughout this process until completion. A lot of times what people don't realize is, for example, when we're working on the development side, really most of the money that we make is actually when the building is finished. So even when you sell a unit in a pre-sale, a lot of people don't realize it's only 50% that you get paid in most times, and then their balance is in completion. So a lot of our salaries are going to be paid in 3-4 years from now. So on the development side, constant communication with the development, constant updates of where the market is, because sometimes you sell a project and the market turns, and the developer should know that some buyers might not complete if the market has gone south. too south that it's actually more for them to walk away from the contract. So it's important that they're aware of it. And then if it goes up, of course, it's great. So a lot of the developments that we saw selling 2014, 15, a good example is Vancouver House, for example, people made quite a bit of money. So even though the market has corrected itself, these guys are still ahead of the game. That's important. But on the buyer side, I feel like you're always, like Amar probably has a great system going. He works with hundreds of buyers to constantly touch base with these buyers, because in the next 3 years a lot can change, 4 years a lot can change. You want to make sure that that deal can still stick around and not go sideways.
Yeah. There's a lot of natural touch points, I feel. So like step one for us is making sure buyers understand that timelines with pre-sales are always hard to pin down. If you need to move into a home at a certain exact date, it's probably not the right thing for you to buy, and we'll shift buyers to looking at the existing market. So it's nice to be able to handle both. But then during this construction process, there's a lot of natural touch points with your buyers anyway, because there's additional deposits that need to be paid. So there's a reminder there. There's additional disclosure statement amendments that come up. So there's a dialogue there. So we find that we're already always involved with that same buyer for another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Because there's these natural kind of communication points as there's updates towards the building anyway, and then you have the walkthrough when it's almost done and getting all the closing stuff ready. So it's important for us. It's like it can be a 5-year transaction with this client, right? So when we're working with these buyers, it is a long thing. And I've got people closing on stuff now they bought 6 years ago. So you do stay in touch with people a long time on these transactions.
Mm-hmm. And how do you deal with that too, with keeping that messaging going throughout?
We're dealing with that right now. We have 4 projects on the go, and we're just closing 198 homes that we sold 3 years ago. So it's been definitely a test of balance right now. But I am master of spreadsheets. For us, that's what keeps everything in check. Mm-hmm. From the developer side, it's a little bit easier, I think, than on the buyer side. You're at all different projects. We at least know we've got it narrowed down to 3 or 4. And we know we're in constant communication with our buyers. We've got great agents, hopefully, that we're working with that also are keeping in touch with their clients. And together we're able to walk them through the whole process. And just stay in constant communication, I think, is important. When you're dealing with a 2 to 3 year timeline, people are getting antsy. They want to move into that home. It takes longer than they always think it's going to take, whether it's on the developer's construction side or just mentally. They just want in their new home. And then the other aspect on the development side for us is that the legal aspect, where we have to ensure that every time there's an amendment to disclosure statement done, every single purchaser needs that amendment immediately. Then we have to keep track of who's received it. They all have to sign off on it. We have to chase those down from the people that haven't returned them. And that's just ongoing. So I feel like there's never really a lapse of timeline. Like you're always doing something for that project right up until completion. And then if you're lucky enough to do key handover like we do, that's another whole aspect of, which is nice. So that's the best part, I think, is that you actually get to see those buyers again. And that's, they've been waiting 2 to 3 years for those keys. So that one it's rewarding.
Yeah, I can't imagine how hard that is to organize. I just think I finally realized exactly you have to get every single one of those signed and then keep track of them and follow up with those. Yeah.
I feel like you guys probably have so much at condensed times because you're closing buildings, where with me it's more like a bunch of clients can more consistency but never that heavy volume at once. Yeah. So I can imagine it when it's close time for you guys, it's like long days.
Well, long days, and then trying to also represent the current development that we're working for. So it's definitely a juggle, but I think we're doing a decent job.
So building a reputation. Amar, I recall you saying in an agent secret talk of yours that there's no real secret to building a strong reputation with a developer, that it's just about being consistent and bringing in reliable buyers and being consistent with that. So on your guys' side, having that really great reputation and those really great relationships is pretty much everything. Can you speak to building a strong reputation for yourself?
Well, I think it's being in constant contact with clients. I think it's being on top of everything. I know Vanessa and I almost in business for 10 years now, and our reputation is I think, pretty awesome.
So I've heard.
But we're consistent, and we work really hard, and I think we're always on. And as much as I know you said that there's got to be a time where you got to turn off here and there, but I feel like Vanessa and I, no matter what happens, no matter if anybody's asking us to do anything or check out something, we're doing it. And it's juggling the family life, but the business, but we're always there for people. And we get back to people right away. We follow up with people right away, developers, clients, friends, family. Like it's just, you're always there and you do what you've been asked to do. And I don't think we've let anybody down. We're constantly on and we're working hard.
It just comes down to work ethic, I think. It's working hard, and for me, it's the balance too. Like it's well known that I take a lot of time off. It's almost a joke when I come into the office. They're like, "Oh, you were away again," but I found that balance, and it took 10 years in business together, but we found it, and we work hard. And when we have to be on, we're on. It's very rare we say no. If somebody wants to see the development at 9 o'clock at night, one of us goes. And I think that's what it comes down to, is just work ethic. We don't have set hours. We work when it's needed, and then we go beyond. And when the time is right, we take that time off, and I think then we can come back and we're refreshed, and we never really burn out.
I find there needs to be a balance. Like you mentioned, it's very important to be able to kind of replenish your energies. It's a very demanding job mentally, I find. When I said you don't sweat, I just meant like it's not a physical job per se, unless you pick up a lot of brochures, which happens.
You were talking about the perception, right?
But it's a very mental job. Like I feel like sometimes at the end of the day, like I'm brain dead. Like I cannot communicate when I come home, speak to my wife, the kids. I'm like completely, nothing is there, nothing is left. But going back into reputation, I find like it's really just to do the right thing. That's really what it comes to. Like you're expected to bring your A game on a professional level. You're expected when someone wants to see it at 9 p.m. To qualify that person and to make sure he's not going to waste your time. And if he is a real buyer, yeah, these girls are going to show up at 9 p.m. and they're going to close the deal. But I find it doing the right thing a lot of times is really what people expect from you, and not to cut corners, keep your professional level at an all-time high, and really deliver. What I find is sitting in a lot of boardrooms and listening to a lot of conversations, it's very easy to come up with why things are not working. Why is this not working? Why did this not work? Oh, this is a problem, this is an issue. And the big thing, what I find really sets the really great agents from the ones that are not so great, is when you come with solutions. Everyone can come up with problems, but we need to move forward. Like right now, it's a challenging market. Everyone knows it's a challenging market. It's not a secret. But you need to come up with solutions. We need to come up with different ideas. You need to come up with creative ideas. And that's what sets your reputation. Someone that solves problems rather than admits there's a problem, because that's not why you're being hired. Everyone knows a problem. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it.
I'm always so surprised with you. You do such incredible volume, but you're always so calm and kind. Where do you think that comes from?
I think a lot of it has to do really with home. My wife created a very calm environment for the kids, myself to come home to. And for me, that has been my saving grace. When me and my wife met, we've kind of sat down and we're like, hey, I really like this real estate industry. She's a massage therapist. And we said, I really want to continue in pushing it, but that will require me putting a lot of hours. Do you want to stay with the kids and I'll just like go to work? And we're like, yeah, you know what, let's do that and see kind of how it works. And it worked for us. For some folks, it doesn't work. And now as the kids are growing older, she's kind of like coming back into the workforce. But for the longest time, I didn't need to worry about, is the house okay? Like, are the kids okay? Pickups, school. Like, I knew she took care of that thing, and that was a big blessing for me. And what that enabled me is really to focus on what I do at work, and it kind of created that really mentality of everything will be cool. And eventually, it's just real estate. Like, you know, at the end of the day, if things fall apart, no one's dead. We're not brain surgeons. You know, we can move on. The deal is dead. Another one will come around. You lose a developer. It's fine. No one will die. And I think that's the mentality. At the beginning, every deal counts. You're like, oh, I remember the first few deals that fell apart. I felt like I lost an arm. It sucks, right? You're like, I can't believe it. I lost it. After a while, you just need to put everything in perspective. You're putting real estate deals together. Things will happen when they need to happen. And I think once you come with this attitude, people are looking to you to keep things calm. If the captain is freaking out, the ship is going down. So just take it easy. That's the idea. Take it easy. It'll be calm, and everything will be great. Like Amar is like always solid. Never seen Amar raise his voice in my life. Maybe now with the puppy.
Does it, right? So I just think you don't get too high and don't get too low. And I feel like when I was new in the business, it's easy to do that. You make a bunch of sales quickly. You think you're some sort of rock star. And then it slows down and you haven't sold something for a month or two, and it's affecting your demeanor and how your people feel that, right? So your reputation comes from consistency and continuity over time, and just doing the same things well for a long period of time, and not reacting to the goods and bads and the market ups and downs. Like the market's the market. We're here to do a job within it. It's always going to have ups and downs. Just do what you do well and keep doing it well for a long period of time, and your reputation will come with that. Just don't be reactive and overreactive, I would say.
Well said.
Yeah, absolutely. You are always so calm, and you've taken on a lot of challenges in the last year.
Yeah.
And you're also working with some newer agents. What is the best piece of advice that you feel like you try to pass on to them?
I think that's a big one, is just don't be obsessed. I mean, it's hard when you're new because every deal does count. You need the money, right? But you don't want to be just so transactional. You want to think of a long-term business strategy and a plan here. It's not just about that one sale. So with newer agents, it's about, you want to map out like, what's my 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, longer term goals here, right? And transactions will come and go. You will lose some that you were close to, and it's going to hurt. And then sometimes you'll get a transaction that came out of nowhere, and you met someone, and the next day they buy a property, and it all balances out in the long run if you're doing the right things consistently long enough. So I think that's the biggest thing I try to teach my new agents, and just not get too connected to any one given transaction. Just do things well for a long time. People will notice it.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So Ben, let's talk about assignments. It's something that's quite simple in theory, but it can get very complicated. Would you mind explaining to anyone who's watching what an assignment is and what your experience is with it?
Sure. When you buy a presale, you're basically buying a piece of paper. You're buying a disclosure statement and the contract agreement that you have with the developer to purchase this unit for X amount of dollars. That's the amount of down payment you've obligated yourself to pay. And these are the colors that you chose, and this is the floor plan, this is the unit. What happens a lot in a rising market is some folks, circumstances change. If they initially bought it as an investment and the market has picked up, so there's some value in that contract because they were able to buy it for a certain amount, the market has increased, so there is some appreciation in value. So for investors, it's a very appealing type of transaction. They put a certain amount of down payment and they're able to sell that contract without having to complete on it for a profit. So if you look at it, you put $100 in the bank, you sell it for $150, they make $50 profit. This is great. They only need to move a few papers around, and that's it. Some people move, job, divorce, disease, like different reasons why that 3-year, 4-year plan is not working anymore. So they need to sell. So they're going to try and flip, assign their agreement to any willing buyer. We've had quite a steep incline in our market between 2014 and 2017, I would say. And part of my business model was to work with developers and offer them my services and be able to facilitate their assignments. So to date, I've been very fortunate to have done quite a few assignments and to kind of realize all the ins and outs of it. And it's a very complicated transaction because there's a lot of things that can go wrong in assignment. And in a market that keeps going on, it's great. Everyone wants to stick to their contract. When the market corrects itself, everyone will try and get out of an assignment. So over the years, a good example is a building named Telus Garden. I sold it back in 2012, and it sold for around, I want to say, $800 a foot. And around 2016, it was about to complete. And I think in that building, I think I did almost 50 assignments just in that building. And basically what happened is these guys bought it for $800 a foot, and they could sell it for $1,200 a foot. So if you look at it, one bedrooms buyers have flipped contracts for $100,000, $150,000. Some of my buyers actually walked away with $1 million profit, which is crazy when you think about it. They stood in line 4 years ago. After 4 years, they sold their contract for $1 million more. So that was great because the market kept on going and they did really well. Another cool building that I'm working on right now is Vancouver House. So 2014, it was a groundbreaking pricing, $1,600 a foot. People thought they were nuts. The market kept climbing, and things in Vancouver House are now trending closer to $1,800 to $2,000 a foot. So again, there's more money to be made. People are flipping assignments. Right now, what's happening is anyone that's bought in the last 2 years are reaching out and be like, hey, Ben, I want to flip it as an assignment. How much money can I make? And I'm like, I'm going to be completely honest with you. There's really no money. You're going to be looking at losing money. And they're like, what do you mean? How can you lose money in Vancouver? I was like, well, you can. Let me show you. So what's happening is the market hasn't gone up. They bought it for a certain amount. They want to get out because they never intended on completing on the unit. And now they need to sell it for a loss that will actually take a portion of their down payment as a loss. So there's assignments could be great if you buy smart, but they can be really terrible if you bought it with never intending on completing on it, and you're stuck with a contract that the developer can legally take you to court and sue you for not completing. So we've seen the good of assignments, and now we're seeing some of the bad because where the market is. So that's really the challenge, and there's a lot of paperwork involved. Every developer has its own different assignment contract, so it's a very, very heavy legal document. The biggest kind of tip I have is if you are doing an assignment, make sure you have a lawyer on a phone call away, because there's a lot of legal stuff, and as much as agents think they know how to do assignments, a lot of them don't. So it's important to always have a lawyer on the go, because that's really just for backup. That's my tip of the day for assignments.
And list it with someone who does enough assignments, because
Yes.
like to your point, a lot of agents are not experienced with them, and they are very complicated. So
Yeah, it's a lot.
Exactly.
A lot, yeah.
So with what Ben touched on, managing the ebb and flow of a developer's expectations in this market, how are you ladies currently doing that?
Yeah, that's the hardest part. You come from a rising market. We're now leveling off, but the expectations are still very high. Developers aren't quite ready to reduce prices. I think back in 2007 and 8, the margins were a lot larger. So they had the opportunity to, call it, liquidate some product. And they were successful back in 2007 and 8. They actually banded together and were able to liquidate large amounts of inventory that kind of cleaned out the market. And that's how we were able to start a rising market again. Right now, we don't have those margins. So they're not able to do that. So the developers have paid a lot more money for land. Construction costs have gone absolutely crazy. The community contributions that they have to pay, the funds are very, very high. So ultimately their margins are a lot smaller than they used to be. And so that's limiting them from being able to drastically reduce prices to quickly correct the market we're currently in. So that's where we come in. So we're trying to come up with creative solutions to still get them the best value for these homes. And they're still building quality homes. It's still costing them what it's costing them. So a lot of them are waiting. Some of them have been offering incentives. And every product's completely different. Every development's different. So we come up with solutions really cater to each development. And that's where we're currently at right now. And some of them are just going to take a lot longer to be absorbed than others. And I think it goes back to really, even for us, we shop all the developers. Before we take on a development, we know who we're working for, what they're building. We want to ensure we're selling quality products so that when we do enter a market like this, we can still stand behind the product that we're selling and feel good that, it's going to rise above all of the other developments, and we'll still be able to, push the inventory along.
Absolutely. That was going to actually kind of lead into my next question, which I'll still ask anyways. When deciding to work with a developer, what kind of thoughts go into that on whether or not it's going to be a strong working relationship? What would you say is the most important?
We're at a place in our career that we're able to shop developers. We're able to pick and choose the developments that we're going to sell. Wasn't the case when we first started out. We were looking to sell anything and everything, and with experience comes wisdom, and we're now at a place where we really are particular about what we take on. And they have to have a great reputation. We actually go through finished product before we sign a contract. We want to see what they built in the past. We have a lot of long-term relationships now, so it's not as common that we're hiring a new client on. But when we do, we're absolutely picky about it.
Great. And Amar, in terms of managing expectations in this market on the buyer's side, especially if someone is maybe bought a year ago, or where their expectations are for the investment value, how would you say you manage those?
I think for us, we try to manage it from step one. So one thing I always tell buyers, if they're buying with the expectation that they're going to flip it through assignment, that should always be a back burner idea. You always need to be prepared to close on that property and be able to close on that property. And I say that to every single pre-sale buyer, do not buy this if you think we're just going to flip it in 2 years and make $1 million like people did with Ben at Telus Garden at times. That's probably not going to happen again. It may at some point, but you can't bank on it.
The Ben
right?
and Amar Paul show is over.
Yeah, so it's about having the right expectations going into it, so that later, a year later, I'm not having to have that conversation with my client and be like, well, I promised you the moon and it's not there right now. So, people also need to shop around with developers, almost back to your last question, coming in from the buyer's perspective, that managing the developer reputation, making sure we buy from the right developers is really important too, because an unhappy buyer at closing because the developer didn't give what they promised and they have a lot of deficiencies in the unit, or they change the appliance package and things like that, it's ultimately going to reflect on my reputation too, because I helped that person buy that. So making sure that at the purchase time, I'm making my buyers aware that even though developer B may be slightly more expensive than developer A, there may be a reason for it. Developer B is solid, top tier developer with a good reputation. There's something to be said for that, right? I feel sometimes with real estate, people think all are the same and they just do a direct price per square foot comparison and stuff like that. And I almost compare it to cars with clients sometimes. You wouldn't just say, because this Porsche has this much horsepower and this Toyota has this much horsepower, they should be the same price. There is a difference in what you're buying, right? And if building B is the Porsche and building A is even a Honda, it's a good car, but it's not a Porsche, you know what I mean? So it doesn't even have to be a bad developer, but there is a reason for price discrepancy and a reason you sometimes want to pay for that better brand, because down the road we won't have to have those hard conversations about something that didn't get delivered.
Just being upfront. Right?
Yeah, it's about getting ahead of it. Yeah, and that comes with experience.
And knowledgeable. He knows all the developers, he knows their track record. And this is where when you work with a professional like Amar, he knows what these guys have done. He knows their value and he can explain it confidently. Where some agents that are not familiar with all the developers can't really understand why this one is priced a little higher than this one. But he can speak about it, and that's really the value one of the values that he brings to the table. Why this is priced like this, even though it's a few blocks away. We're seeing something very similar on Cambie. There's been so many developments up and down Cambie. They all look more or less the same, 6 stories. They're made out of concrete. They have air conditioning, granite countertops. If you don't really know the backstory of each development, you would think, oh, they should all be priced the same. They're all literally 6 blocks apart. But then you have this guy over here that's much more expensive than the rest of Cambie. But if you don't know why, you'll have a very hard job explaining why this is worth more. So I think that's where it comes to education. For us, this is our job, to educate ourselves and to be able to communicate that to the clients in an effective way, so they have a better idea of what they're buying, because they trust in us, and hopefully you're doing a good job in that.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, as an agent, you can't be afraid to almost sometimes try to pull your client back from buying something. And it's easy some agents just want the transaction and they'll let their clients buy anything, but you've got to stick by your track record. And if they're buying something that you don't feel good about and you know that maybe this developer had a bad reputation from a previous building or something like that, you have to say it. You know, you can't just be there to collect a check because they're going to buy it. You know, you got to give that honest advice, even if it sometimes means killing a deal.
I feel like kind of a common answer to that is also just that you guys have all learned that working with integrity and being upfront is such a big lesson. What would you say? What would you tell your younger self? So you guys both all talked about, you know, just being super hungry and it being very hard. What advice would you have to your younger self when you first started out? Let's start with Vanessa.
My younger self did a lot of things wrong. There's a lot of advice I would give. I think Amar said it best. It's just when you were starting out in the business, not getting too high. I was fortunate to start out and had great success early on. And I was just always I was driven. Even my younger self was very, very driven. And I don't think I got caught up in any of that. I just always wanted to do more and be better. So I'm not really sure. I don't think I made too many mistakes, but I think the biggest thing though would have been I would have been pickier on developments. We really didn't have anything that we sold that wasn't great. I think we had one development and we're not too proud of, but we learned. We learned from that, and so that would really be the only advice, was just not to be too transactional, not to be too hungry. It's just you've always just have to do what's best for your clients and your buyers.
Where would you say your drive comes from, if you were to?
Wow, twofold. I always really just want to be the best at what we do and what I do. Early on, I always said I was working for a larger company and I just felt that they were doing too much and they were really good at a lot of things, but they weren't exceptional at one thing. And I said, when Shar and I started our company, I said, I want to be exceptional at this one thing. And that for us, that niche was that small to mid-sized developers. And I've always had a great work ethic. You know, my dad, from a very young age, kind of taught me that working hard pays off, and there's just never been an off button. I just started working full-time at 14 and never stopped.
Mm-hmm. I'm always curious with people of like, where do you think, because it's something you can't teach?
No, absolutely not. We struggle with that.
Come within. What would you say, what advice would you have for your younger self, just starting out?
Well, Amar talked about it. It's when you lose a deal, not to take it personally, and it's gonna happen, and you're gonna bounce back next week. Like, so that for me, I think is the biggest thing, is to tell my younger self that things are gonna fall through. You may not get what you want. You may not get what you want for the client, but it's gonna happen, and it's gonna be okay. I need to relax a little bit more on certain things.
Sometimes it's probably because you care though, and you work so hard.
Yeah,
that you're
I just let things fester. And if it wasn't for my husband and Vanessa, I think it's just, I pick up the phone and I'm like, you need to talk me off this ledge. And they usually do. So I think that's the main thing, is that things are gonna happen and you just need to learn to just let it go.
and work through it.
And work through it, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amar, what advice would you have for your younger self?
So many things, but one thing that was big for me is in my early years, I think my ego got me like comparing to other agents a lot. And I think a lot of young realtors probably do that. Like, you see the person you think has the business you want, and then you also see the people coming in with you, and you almost do this measuring stick with each other of like, how many transactions is this person doing? How many am I doing? And then how's that business model and how do I get there? And I think it took me a while to just focus on what I really wanted to do and not care if, you know, agent B is doubling my production. I don't care. And now it's about, this is how I want to build my business. This is what I want to be good at. This is the people I want to surround myself with on my team and how we want to operate. And I don't kind of have to be in any sort of category or get some sort of awards or recognitions to justify what I'm doing anymore. And I think the earlier you can take that ego out of what you're doing, you'll do better, and you'll just be happier with, that stress you bring home of like trying to compete with other people is not good. So get rid of that as early as possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you really accomplished that, because one thing people say about you is that you're an egoless leader.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I just hide it. Yeah, I think I actually had a lot of ego. I don't put it out in my persona, I think, but I'm quite competitive, and I don't show it in like and it doesn't manifest in an aggressive way, but I do internalize stuff and I get really competitive at times. So. That's a good thing. I think most successful agents are probably quite competitive, but it's like channeling that competitiveness positively and not letting it control you.
Pushing it into ambition.
Yeah, exactly, and not like letting it stress you out if something doesn't hit a target that someone else has. Like it's, my targets are my targets, and I'm gonna hit them because I want to hit them, and that's finally getting to that place was big for me.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, I think touching on that point, competitiveness. I'm a very competitive person, I would say, and I noticed that a lot of the folks in kind of like the sphere of my colleagues are very competitive as well, and I found that ego also comes into way. I would say the first few years, not as much as ego, more I would really take every transaction. Like when I lost a transaction, I had a hard time. Like Sharlene, very hard time, and that really stressed me out, I would say. And I didn't have the tools, or I didn't have a mantra at the time to be able to be like, hey, just put everything in perspective. And I think that was my biggest challenge as an agent starting up. I was just like, I wanted to take the world. And when things didn't work out, I really kind of put everything on my shoulder. I was like, you messed up. And I think as I grew older and I kind of looked at everything in a much wider lens, I kind of put everything in perspective. I completely agree with Amar. Like, you set your own benchmark, and it doesn't matter if the other guy has a higher benchmark. As long as you're comfortable with your benchmark, just run with it. The challenge I find with our industry is really you can make so much money, and it really all depends on how much money you find is enough for you. Like, really, sky's the limit. You can work for 18 hours a day, you can cold call, knock doors, and you will make a lot of money. And the challenge is, if you don't have any type of I would say a frame, you really don't know what you're swimming. Imagine like you're swimming in the ocean and there's really no end for it. Where when you're swimming in a swimming pool, you know where the end is. So at least you kind of have an idea, I made it, and then you can go back. But in the ocean, I feel the first few years, I was swimming in the ocean. I was taking anything and everything I could. And that brings me to my next point, is really focus. At the beginning, I remember my first deal that I've done was actually in Abbotsford. And I was just like, I was driving, I was loving it. These couple was coming in from Edmonton. It was actually a house. And looking like now at my career where I am now, I know I want to be in Vancouver. Like, that's the market that I know, that's the market that I want to specialize in. And I won't go to Abbotsford. Like, I don't know Abbotsford. I can't offer any value. Focus. A lot of agents are all over the place. They'll take a listing in Burnaby, in Richmond, in North Van, and they're going to have a buyer looking in Abbotsford. And there's really no value you can offer, because sitting on a computer and looking on MLS you won't get the full picture of what these markets are. And at the beginning, I was like that. I wasn't focused. So my biggest advice to young Ben will be like, focus and really don't take things to heart. Like, set your goals, and once you reach them, high five and move on, but not like try and get everything and anything, because it's like a candy shop. You can work any day if you want, and it's a problem for people that are workaholics. Like, I have that issue, and that's one of my challenges, is that I have a challenging times with putting borders, and I'm getting better at it, I think.
Well, I think that's probably a lesson you only really learn by going through it. Sure. I'm sure if someone may have told you that, but it's kind of one of those things that you realize you're better when you know who you are and you focus on that. But it's a really hard lesson to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I didn't have anyone to teach it to me. And I think that was one of the challenges that I had with the industry when I started, is that people weren't willing to give advice. And I vowed to myself that anytime anyone reaches out for advice, it's no skin off my back. Like, if you succeed, I succeed. All of that mentality of like, oh, this is my business. No, it's not. The business there's enough for everyone. And I think I think that's not the way to look at things. There's enough for everyone. Share your knowledge. It's going to come back tenfold, but don't do it because it's going to come back. Just do it because be a good person. And I think it comes across any industry or any type of life lesson. So I just wish someone would have saved that 3 years of of stress.
I think it's still a process too, right? So I feel like 5 years from now we'll be like, 2024 Amar. I wish you could tell 2019 Amar this lesson. Like, it never shuts off, right? You're always learning and figuring things out. And I'm sure 5 years from now I'll be looking back and saying, I wish I knew that in 2019. But you progress, right?
Evolve, hopefully.
It's also sometimes not being so hard on yourself. I feel like everyone at this round table, I think that they seem like people that sometimes put a lot of pressure on themselves. When you were going through that, did you have a bit of an aha moment, or was it just like kind of hitting your head over and over again before you?
You know what? I think I lost a. I remember that actually. It was a pretty big deal. It was around $10 million, and I feel like I've done anything and everything I could to put that deal together. And like every deal, it falls in the 11th minute. Like everything was buttoned up. I was just like, this is great. I just closed this amazing deal, and literally it collapsed. And I was just like, I was down. Because I worked on it. I want to say for almost 3 months. It was like a constant work on that specific client. But then literally 4 or 5 days after, another deal came around. I want to say it was around 7 million, and it really like smooth sailing, boom. And then I looked back and I was just like, all that stress that you really took for the last 3 months on this deal, and look how easy this happened just because things fall into place. It really put everything in perspective. And from moving forward from that was kind of a very pivotal moment for me. Some you're going to lose, some you're going to win. At the end of the day, just really set what your benchmark is and put the work to get there. And once you're there, just really look back and acknowledge it. I found over the years that I would hit those benchmarks, and I would just like go for the next one. And I was like, I worked really hard to achieve that benchmark, but that competitiveness around you is just really contagious. So you don't really enjoy your wins. And that's not good because you will never be satisfied. And in our industry, I find that that's a common thread. Like people don't stop and be like, yeah, good job, you did it, congrats. They just go for the next and the next, and you're never going to be happy. And that goes into kind of happiness. It's beyond real estate. It's in many, many ways. But really for people to stop, smell the flowers, and enjoy what they've done, because they should appreciate that.
For sure.
Yeah.
So now for advice for a buyer coming into a presale. So let's imagine that someone is watching this and they are thinking about going into a sales center after watching this. What advice would you have for that person?
I would call Amar first.
Let's have a coffee first. It depends on the buyer and their criteria. Obviously, there's so many different things, but let's assume they're buying a place to live in. Step one, like I like to start with my buyers not even at sales centers. Let's have a meeting outside of sales centers. Let's really dig down into what you're looking for, your timelines, the purpose and why you want this property. If it's a first-time buyer or an experienced buyer, obviously all these things change it. I like to educate my buyers on what buying a presale is going to entail before we look at properties. So just getting them familiar with different developers, different types of construction, concrete versus wood frame, how pre-sales work, how deposit structures work, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many things that we can go through in a coffee meeting, so they're an education level ahead before we go actually physically tour properties. And then, using that information to go out there and start, physically seeing sales centers and walking in there with a bit of knowledge of kind of, you're already on this path to getting to where you're trying to get to. So it's kind of stepping back a step and starting with the basics, I guess, is where I would start.
Wonderful.
And talking to a bank.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's a big one.
Making sure you're able to afford what you are looking at.
Yeah.
I think that's huge. A lot of people come in and they're like, oh, we want this. And it's like, oh, sorry, I'm not approved for that at all.
Yeah, and then at that point, they've already seen.
Yeah.
They fall in love with something and they're like, they got to backtrack. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So would you say the first conversation should be with a bank?
Well, what Amar is saying is perfectly bang on, but the the client, and I'm sure that's going to be one of his first questions is, have you been to a bank? Have you been pre-approved? Where are you at? Are you able to afford this $800,000 condo that you want so badly? And then you start asking all the questions. I find a lot of people come in and they're like, oh, no, I'm not sure what I can afford, or, I'm just browsing, or, yeah. So
I think a lot of people treat sales centers like kind of like open houses. So it's like step one, let's just go see what's out there. And that's fine. But if you really want to get serious about the buying process, having that next step with a qualified agent, one of us is great, but anyone who's qualified, and a banker, and getting really into the nitty gritties of what you're actually looking for, that's the next proper step to get serious about it.
I'm so surprised at how many buyers come in unrepresented. It actually shocks me. It doesn't cost them anything. The sellers are actually paying their commissions, and it's just a world of difference if they come in with, and it's not just any agent, really shop for an agent that is experienced in project sales. Amar, you would save so many clients that come in our way so much time and heartbreak when they ultimately fall in love. We're doing our job, we're selling it to them, they want to buy it, but then they can't, for many different reasons. So it's really nice when buyers have already sat down for that initial meeting with an agent. They come in they know the expectations are there. We hopefully meet them, and it makes the whole process a positive one. When they come in and really don't understand why they're not able to walk through a finished product. It happens all the time. We're selling you something that's going to be built in 3 years, so unfortunately you cannot walk through it at this moment. It's the most common misconception when they come in. So yeah, working with an experienced agent on the buying side, I think is very helpful.
For sure.
I think it'll also save you money. I'm pretty sure it'll save you money if you have the right agent. I've been on the other side of the table for many, many years where folks come in unrepresented, and it's kind of like buying in a shop. They come in, they want this unit, this is the dotted line, and they just write. With the right agent, you can definitely get better terms, better type of perks, better incentives, and I think that comes into the value what agents bring into the table. Also, the financing are a little different when you buy a pre-sale that will be ready in 3 years. It's a lot of times walking into BMO or TD, the agent won't be able to lock you a mortgage for 3 years. So that's important to remember when buying a pre-sale. The financing vision is more of a 2 to 3, 4 year commitment. So it's a little different than if you'd bought something that's ready to move into. So buyers need to be aware of that as well. Circumstances change, people change jobs, so just to make sure that they can afford this home in 3 years, because a lot can change. But overall, I think the biggest kind of tip I can give someone who's buying a pre-sale now is there's a lot of information out there. Developers are spending thousands of dollars to get your eyeballs on their product, but to use someone that can guide you through it, because there's a lot of stuff that you shouldn't buy for various reasons, and I think a proper agent who knows their stuff can help you navigate through it.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I think there's a common misconception that not using a realtor, you'll save money.
Yeah, it's very old school, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I would love to hear all of your predictions on what the pre-sale market in Vancouver is going to do in the next 5 years. It's not like we're on camera or anything.
Well, let me just get my crystal ball right over here. I got it in my backpack. Let me just pull it up. Let me tell you. What's interesting is I'll tell you what we're seeing now, and that should give you some kind of an indication of where the market is going. So if for example, I'm meeting with developers, and if we're looking at anything in downtown or the west side of Vancouver, big ticket items like big towers, pretty high-end stuff. Developers right now, and the common conception in the market is that the market right now is not in a position to absorb that product. So what that means is they're basically shelving these towers, shelving these projects until they can feel like there's more need for it. So when you look at real estate, one of the big things that you need to keep in mind is it's all about supply and demand, really. There's a lot of other stuff that kind of fuels supply and demand, but it's the basic economics of supply and demand. And what's happening right now is there's not a lot of supply being given to the market just because the market conditions are not optimal. What that will do, not now, maybe in the next 6 months, next year, 2 years, what's going to happen is buyers are still going to buy. That's life continues. You need to eventually have a home if you choose to go up or down or whatnot. So there's not going to be as much supply. And what that will create is it will revamp demand. And if you look at the market since the 70s, interest rate went up, they stopped building, and then all of a sudden demand went up. So it's kind of a wave. And on the pre-sale world, what we're seeing is there's no new product coming. So it leaves you with a very limited supply of projects to choose out of. Once that supply is depleted, then you're going to start seeing more construction. But right now, if you are a buyer and you're looking in downtown, there's 3 active projects, maybe 4 that are currently selling. So if you're looking to buy a pre-sale in downtown, all of downtown, there's only 4 options for you as a buyer. If you looked at 2-3 years ago, there were maybe 8 or 9. So that gives you a good indication, if you're a buyer, where the market is going in the next few years.
For sure. Any predictions?
I'm with Ben. It's ultimately the supply and demand, and BC especially. I think there's so much government intervention, so it's really hard to say if another tax comes forward. We just really don't know. But without anything throwing us for a big loop, I agree. I think that developers are holding off selling. I do think that they're sitting on a lot of land, however, so they can turn that switch pretty quickly. But right now, a lot of them are just holding off and waiting for product to be absorbed. And if there isn't going to be anything to buy, the demand is going to build, and they'll start building again. And hopefully, we'll just find a nice leveling.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully, they don't all come back to the market at the same time
Yeah.
and reintroduce an oversupply.
Exactly.
So I try not to get into predictions with my clients. I mean, I make my own purchases, so I'm predicting with my own wallet. But it's just, to Vanessa's point, it's like there could be some tax that comes in that we don't see coming. And those sort of things have such a big impact on our market that even just looking at fundamentals of supply and demand and immigration coming here and the economy and jobs and unemployment and rental vacancies, there's so many positives in Vancouver, and Greater Vancouver, I should say, that all those things seem to be indicators of a strong economy and probably a strong real estate market. But then something could change politically, or new taxes introduced, and all these things play a factor that we may not even foresee these next things coming. So all you can do is kind of take all those things collectively and make the best educated decisions you can based on it. I still think long-term prices will eventually rise again. I think we're starting to feel a little bit of that on the resale side again with a spike in activity right now. So that's my prediction, but who knows, right? I'd never want to be that realtor who's like, oh, it always goes up, you'll never lose money on pre-sale. Like, I never wanted to be that sort of opinion, and I don't.
Wonderful. So you're all very experienced and have great reputations in the industry. But beyond that, I'm curious, I would love to hear each of you say what you find unique or admire most about one another. Start with Ben.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I'll set the stage. I've known Sharlene, I want to say, since 2007 now, and kind of our lives have crossed paths in different types of projects and works. And what I find about Sharlene that I like is very solid. Like, there's no big ups and downs, just from what I see. Could be that it's different inside, internal. Vanessa will know. So very solid, and I feel that is a very important feature for a good agent and a broker. If you're representing developers or buyers, I love that about her. Vanessa, I don't know that well. This is the second time that I've met her, actually, but the one thing that really kind of touched me is really the work ethics that she has, and it's very admirable. Over the years, hiring folks to come and sell projects, not a lot of people like to work hard, interestingly enough, and they like to make a lot of money. And there's a big disconnect there. And it's like they want to live the lifestyle, but they don't want to put the work. And over the years, I found that it's not that easy to find people that are hard workers. So I admire that a lot about her. And Amar, I think the first time I met Amar, I want to say it was almost 8 years ago. I think you were just out of Mac at the time through McDonald. And I remember that vision of kind of creating that buyers group. And it wasn't done at the time because everyone would just take their buyer and walk to a presentation gallery. And there was no one that had that vision of what he was doing, kind of getting groups of buyers and utilizing that power. So I love to see kind of what that has grown into, and I have a lot of respect for that. So really all but positive, and kudos to have these guys work alongside with me at Oakwyn.
Wonderful.
I think it's great because I've known all of you for quite a while now, and I think in this industry you do see a lot of the same faces over a long time, and it's nice to see everyone's growth. And for me, Vanessa and Sharlene, I admire their teamwork. You don't see a lot of teams that have been together 10 years now, and doing seemingly so cooperatively and getting along so well and covering each other's backs. And as someone who's now had a team for a few years and is growing my team, if I can get to a 10-year mark and have that kind of stability and working together that well with my team members, I think that's something to really shoot for. So that's very admirable. With Ben, I feel like Ben to me has always been one of the people in the new development industry that I think personifies a lot of the luxury market. So I've always looked up to Ben's ability to sell really beautiful buildings and work with the top tier of the industry. And I think he does a really good job of walking the line of luxury but not being pompous in any way, where sometimes in that market you have a bit too much ego. So I've always liked working with Ben on that sort of properties and higher end stuff, but he can talk to it in just a really nice way, an eloquent way. Really knows his architecture, his developers, and I've always admired that about Ben.
And he's calming.
He's so calming.
He's very talking to Ben, and we've known each other for a long time, and it's just, you've grown since you started. You're calm and you're soft spoken, but you're driven and successful.
Thank you.
And Amar, you're just really good. You're good. You know everything. You know what you're doing, and I think any of your clients are very lucky to have someone like you, because you know the pre-sale side, all about it, resale, everything. I think you've got the whole package. And Vanessa, 10 years in business with her, and I would have to say she's given me confidence in myself. Yeah, she's driven, she's successful, and she keeps our business going.
Boy, thank you. I'm going to start with Sharlene. It's so rare. Amar nailed it. I don't know too many teams or partners, just two people that have lasted as long as we have. And she's really the yin to my yang, and we work so well together. And I think it's hard to find somebody else that has the same future goals, ambition, and drive. Especially, I hold the bar really high for myself, and I know she does as well. And being able to juggle the family end and the business together for this many years, and really seamlessly, it's been amazing. It's been a good ride. Ben, I think that you are amazing. I really do. I want to be around you. You're just calm and successful and knowledgeable. And I think that I can see how you do very well sitting in front of a developer and in front of clients. I would hire you. And Amar, I think I met you when you were first starting out. Yeah. Literally first sales center, and I'm so proud of you and your team. You've built a name for yourself in this industry, and you now have your own office and team, and everybody knows who you are, and I would recommend you in a heartbeat for any buyer.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. So thank you all for sitting down with me. This was our second roundtable conversation, and we're just so lucky that we have all of you together. You guys all embody work hard, stay humble, and lead by example in every way, and are such great pillars for our core values. So I just wanted to thank you all for coming here. And I wanted to congratulate you. We'll do a coffee cheers on your fantastic careers, and I'm very much looking forward to see what happens over the next 5-10 years. Cheers.
Thank you for having us.